All right, welcome back to Theology in a Raw, Jackie. Holier Than Thou. What led you to want to write a book on holiness when this topic? I mean, I wouldn't say this is the most attractive topic or something that is just books that are just flying off the shelf talking about holiness. And I don't know, maybe that's one of your motivations. But yeah, what when did you
Yeah.
get the idea for writing this book? And yeah, would love to hear kind of an elevator
I
pitch of what
don't
it's all about.
yeah, I don't even know where the original idea came from. But I think if anyone has followed me for a considerable amount of time, I think you'll see a great emphasis on the person of God in my ministry.
Mm-hmm.
That's what intrigues me. It kind of is just always undergirding everything I say. And so when it came to holiness, that's kind of like a really big deal as it relates to the nature of God, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to wonder like, man, I'm curious about this subject. And so my curiosity was like, let's write a book about it. So a book is a really great excuse to spend 2 years studying it, you know? And I also feel like a lot of the books I had read prior to yeah, a lot of the books I read about the topic, it felt like they only focused on the moral purity of God and how that related to our lack of holiness. And so these books just they made me super introspective, but also super discouraged.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, I feel like there's more to holiness than just wrath and judgment.
Yeah.
And so really the whole point of my book is to say, man, if God is morally pure and if God is transcendent and if his holiness really is an expression of his beauty, then that is an incentive for our faith. It's to say that all that God has revealed himself to be really is our greatest reason for
Mm-hmm.
why we should trust him. And I
Yeah.
think that's a completely different angle
Hmm.
than saying God is holy, stop sinning so you won't go to hell.
So when I heard you writing the book, I mean, I don't know if I heard from you or just no. I think you told me when you were
We talked about it.
last summer, and that wasn't public yet. I don't think so. Yeah, I guess I knew about it
Uh-uh.
before it started hit. But my immediate thought was like, there's been some pretty good books that I've read on holiness. A lot of them were written, more than 60 years ago. But man, they're
Yeah.
and I love theology, so like I like these books, but man, they're not written very like beautifully in the sense of like I don't think this
No.
this author is very creative. So I was like, man, this might be the first book on this topic by somebody who has a good level of creativity and imagination and just flair in your writing style.
I
Would
I think
that
Tozer, I think knowledge of the holy is special. I think that's one of the few that I've read
yeah,
that not only engages me theologically but also like
yeah.
my affections.
He was a good writer, wasn't he?
He
I mean,
was. It
I
was it was beautiful. It was
yeah,
beautiful writing. Yeah.
yeah. I don't know too many Christians that book hasn't had a massive. I mean, that's probably the first, second, maybe the first Christian book I read.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, yeah, it just blew my mind. Is
Yeah.
that the book where you said the most important thing? What's that
Yeah.
phrase? What's the line
The
I'm
the
thinking of?
what comes into your mind when you think about God is the most important thing about you. That's like in his introduction. And he just starts off the gate like,
Dang.
oh man, now I'm like thinking about what I think about.
Yeah.
So it's just and so that book really inspired me in how I approached Holier Than Thou. It really made me say, okay, how do I not only teach and explain the scriptures as it reveals God, but how do I also engage the
hmm
imagination and the affection of readers as I do so?
hmm
And so, yeah, A.W. Tozer is totally a big inspiration for the way I wrote this book.
How's your book different than his? Like, yeah, I'm curious.
Um, I'm more poetic in
Yeah.
my approach,
hmm
much way more metaphors. It's longer. I think
Yeah.
Tozer's book, it doesn't, it's kind of, it's a quick read.
Yeah.
And then I dig deeper into passages
Okay.
and walk. So even I have a chapter about called Unholy Gods, and basically saying trying to explain how our idols are unholy because they lack the transcendent and moral value that God himself has. And I walk through Exodus 19 for an entire chapter. And so I don't think Tozer's book has those types of things where it feels like you're kind of walking through a sermon. Yeah.
I don't know if he dealt with this. It's been so long since I read it. But I mean, like you said, you have the moral character of God. Then you have just the transcendent set apartness, the creature creator distinction. I feel like we often view that very abstractly or through a individual lens. But what about holiness as like the Leviticus holiness? Like we're to be a set apart people from the word, almost like cultural holiness, if you will. Is that an accurate? I'm just thinking out loud here. Is that are those categories?
I think that's one way to apply it, because we can't apply God's eternality to ourselves. You know, his utter independence from creation and creatures in terms of his existence. But I think we can apply, like, man, like God is different and he's unique and he's set apart from the world. So in the same way, I need to be set apart from the world. I'm still dependent, I'm still creaturely, but I'm unique and I exist in a different way than those who haven't been made new creatures. So I think that's one way to try to apply God's holiness to our own, way of life.
Dude, what were some things that you like know now or believe now that you didn't back then? Maybe it wasn't like a change of view, but just something like, wow, studying this topic for 2 years, like my life is not going to be the same after this because of these certain truths or anything. Or maybe you did change. I'm curious if you did have a change of a view or perspective while writing the book.
Yeah, I think what I believe is just it's become more concrete.
Okay.
For one, but I think even like the best example I can give is my prayer life is different. Like my honesty with God is different. My consistency with prayer is different, and it's because I'm much less guarded with God, and I think I've gotten that just from. It's hard to like really study and see how faithful God is and how consistent he is. And even how in John 8, Jesus says, hey, can any of you convict me of sin? If not, why don't you believe me? Man, that's a profound statement. If a human being was to say that, they would be a narcissist. to say there is nothing in me that you can accuse me of being wrong or unrighteous or unethical. And it's like, man, if that is the God that I serve, why can't I just tell him the truth? Say, I don't like this. This is uncomfortable. But it's also, man, if this is the God I serve, in his sovereignty, you're being really wise. You're being morally pure. You're being good. And so I think it frees you to just have a relationship and a friendship with God in a way that's just different.
That's good. So you mentioned Exodus 19. That's a good one. Do you have a chapter on Isaiah 6? I mean, is that? I know that's always the go-to,
that's the introduction.
But it's like I think
that's the first chapter.
Okay, yeah.
You kind of have to.
Yeah.
It's like a thing. Like you have the angels saying, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory." And it's interesting because it's like, man, if I think in our modern culture, in our modern society, if anyone was to sing about the nature of God, the first thing they would say most likely is love, love, love. And so it's significant that the only time that the holy that an attribute of God is sung to, what do they call it? Sung 3 times is in Revelation and in Isaiah, and it's all about the holiness of God. And that says something, that this is the attribute that seems to anchor all others. Because if he wasn't holy, would he be loved? No. His holiness is what makes him so not self-centered and not self-protective and not arrogant and not egotistical and not unrighteous in his justice. It's his holiness that all the other attributes shine forth, I believe.
So yeah, I've heard people say God is love, and that's it's been a while since I really thought about kind of attributes of God and how they relate. Yeah. It sounds terrible. Like, isn't that something I should think about every day? But you know what I mean. Hopefully, but yeah, people often say, "Well, God is God is all these things, but the central piece is God is love. Like that is the anchor. You're saying you want to flip that around a little bit and say even that needs to be anchored in something more foundational, namely God's holiness.
Yeah, because he is love. First John says God is love.
Right.
But my argument again is, would he be love if he was not holy?
Huh.
If you remove that aspect of his being, and I don't want to argue attributes as if they're like, he's holy here, he's love here. He just is who he is.
Yeah.
But I think for the sake of understanding, how they work together, it's like, man, if you remove that moral righteousness from God, love is impossible at that point.
Yeah. I wonder if it is a little bit of a modern way of thinking where we want to compartmentalize or put like what's most important or whatever. Like he is who he is. But I like your language of the holiness kind of anchoring and making sense of these other attributes need holiness for these attributes to make sense. I wonder if you could say it about all of them, but I've often thought about I've often taken Genesis 1 and 2, and I know you go back to Genesis 1 and 2 a lot too. As Genesis 1 and 2 kind of like the transcendence of God. He's wholly other. Genesis 2 is I can understand why some liberal scholars say these are written by two different people, because their portrait of God is.
Why do they say that?
Well, several reasons. One, you have Genesis 1 uses Elohim exclusively. Genesis 2:4 to the rest of the chapter uses Yahweh Elohim exclusively. But I think it's primarily the portrait of God is Genesis 2. He's so near, so intimate, so involved with his creation. Genesis 1, he's so wholly other, and I'm like, yeah, that's the God we serve. He's both,
yeah.
I think
go ahead. I'm sorry.
You go ahead.
No, I was going to say just the first verse, in the beginning, God created. Whoa. Now we have a lot of questions. Where did he come from? How did he create? Did he borrow? Did he ask for advice? Where'd the power come from? Where'd this insight? It's just like, this was just all within himself. And so he really is extremely unique. But then he creates and he communicates and he talks and he abides with and he loves, but he also has a standard and a law that he imposes with consequences. And so it's just all of this transcendence and moral righteousness or moral purity working together in a really interesting way.
Why do you think, this might be a softball, but I'm curious to hear what you're going to say. Why do you think there is such, obviously, a cultural aversion, a disdain for the idea that somebody else has authority over you, over your identity, over your behavior, over your life, that they have the right to tell you what to do, what not to do? Some of those rules and regulations might make sense to you, some might not. And that authority he doesn't have to explain why. He doesn't have to. He can if he wants to, and he often does, but he doesn't have to.
Yeah.
Like just the last 30 seconds of what I like, that would just be like, people be freaking out. But I see that aversion trickling down into the church. Right? Do you? Is that and lesser so? But I don't know. Like that.
I think that's the appeal of false teaching. Is that most false teaching at some point allows us a sort of freedom from certain moral regulations. In Jude, you have people saying, "No, the grace of God allows us to be sensual." That was the temptation of that false teaching. I have two thoughts. I think one is deception and deceit, as observed in Genesis 3. The day you disobey God, you will actually be like him. You will have rights and the freedom to do whatever it is that you want to do, or so you think. But I think there's also, suffering is a reality and how it shapes us. Meaning, I think we've had people in the positions of authority, whether it's our parents, our bosses, our presidents, our whatever, who have abused us and taken advantage of us. We have relationships with people that we're supposed to trust that show themselves to be untrustworthy or unfaithful. And I really do think that that makes us super guarded from the idea of anyone having any control over us. And one of my suspicions, which is what I address in the book, is that I think that sometimes we project the potential for abuse or unfaithfulness and flat out just unrighteousness onto God. And so it means I'm the only person that can trust me with me. I can't trust you with me because I don't know what you'll do, which is why we need to reorient our thinking and reestablish what it means for God to be holy. Because if there is the possibility that he can do you wrong, then that means he's not really God.
I mean, I that's so helpful. I can resonate with that psychologically. Like, that does make sense, that if you have suffered, as so many have, traumatic abuse from an authority, maybe it's not even trauma, but it's you've maybe been through spiritual abuse. And I've been listening to that podcast on Mars Hill Church. You've been listening to
Man, it's fantastic. It's sad, but it's fantastic.
It's enlightening, and it's needed. I would say it's needed because listening to it, I'm like agonizing. I'm like angry. I'm looking at my own heart, like how am I? Like, maybe I'm abusing authority. And just that the responsibility that comes with any kind of platform or position of power. It's not an easy listen, but I can imagine. I know people who were went through Mars Hill and the stories they tell, man. But physical abuse, a father figure, a church figure, a trusted person. That I can absolutely see where people would hear about the authority of God the Father, even, right? And like, be just like that.
And not really even extremes. Just there are always minor offenses against us, even. Like someone ignores you when you're speaking, doesn't answer your phone call. Like, just there's even the small things I think wear on our humanity, where it's like, man, like, people don't love me the way I believe I should be loved, which is true. Nobody loves us the way that we should be loved except God. But we live in a space and in a world where we're not exposed, I think, to that love in the way that we will be in heaven. And it's frustrating. So
how's the book been received so far?
It's not out yet, so I don't know.
Oh, it comes out in 3 weeks.
No, I don't know. But I mean, and it's hard to judge from your editors and things because they have a little bias in them.
Yeah. I mean, I love that you are the one writing this book. I'm not going to mention, but like more of a, for lack of better terms, kind of an old school theologian who's, I don't know, is probably going to repeat what's already been written. Like I think people will listen to you that might not grab a book on holiness written by. The first name that came to mind was something like Carl Truman. His book's sitting right here. I'm like, I don't even know, like. But like somebody that's like, a good scholar, a good voice, but like, the people that are going to read a book on holiness by Carl Truman, again, I don't mean this at all in a negative way, are going to be people who follow Carl Truman, and actually want to know about holiness. But I imagine your book's going to reach a much broader audience.
Perhaps, which is exciting to me, because the book is inspired by a lot of dead people, like you got Tozer, you have Sproul, Stephen Charnock, Arthur Pink, like Moses. Like the book is inspired by ancient sources for the most part, or just old thought and thinkers, C.S. Lewis even. And so it's cool to be able to kind of modernize their perspectives and deliver it in such a way that I think is still winsome and compelling, but it's an old truth that I'm just delivering in a new way.
You read all those old school, the Charnock. I never read him, but man, that's
Charnock. I probably cited him Not the most, but almost the most.
Huh.
Because his what is it called? I have to look at it. Yeah, The Existence and
Yeah.
Attributes of God. It was written in like the 1800s, but
Yeah.
it's his perspectives on the justice of God and the holiness of God and the goodness of God. He has whole volumes on each attribute.
Hmm.
And I don't know if it's because they didn't have cell phones or what, but I feel like the thoughtfulness and
Huh.
insight that he brings to the discussions about the person of God are special.
Huh. Would you rate him like one of the top best books on holiness that you read during the last couple of years?
It's not even on holiness, it's about, but
Or
as far as the person of God, absolutely.
really? Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like it's a yeah, I just think everybody should have it in their library,
Hmm.
you know.
A.W. Pink, that dude's crazy, man. I mean,
He's interesting.
I read his
He,
what's the wasn't on holiness, I don't think. It was on the sovereignty of God. Is that
yeah,
something
I can't say I spent a ton of time with his stuff,
that dude's like a
but
10-point Calvinist.
oh, I didn't know there were extra numbers. That's terrifying, actually.
Oh, yeah. No,
To know
I
what additional issues we might have.
I heard that he had my listeners fact check me on this, Google it or whatever, but somebody told me like a year ago that he had some kind of almost like a mental breakdown because his view on God was so like, or he had such a real specific and narrow doctrine on
Hmm.
every little point, and he just couldn't find anybody else who would agree on him on everything, and didn't find, in a sense, it was almost like, I don't know if he's a hermit or whatever, but at the end, and just
Hmm.
didn't end well because he just was so
That's
hardcore about every
fascinating.
little kind of doctrinal point. Which I reading this book early on in my life, I was like, yeah, I mean, it was pretty hardcore, but
That's fascinating.
yeah.
Yeah, which speaks to, how God has revealed himself. So he is to a certain degree knowable,
Mm-hmm.
but there are things that are unknowable.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think trying to be so theologically rigid at
Mm-hmm.
times can keep us from just the beauty of mystery.
Yeah.
Like there's some mystery that we should be okay with.
Right. Right. Right.
He is transcendent after all.
Right.
Like,
I,
he
I
exists in three persons.
I
Like
wonder if,
that
cause
stuff is weird.
I'm constantly like trying to connect cultural progress or movements with how we analyze or think about God and theology and everything. And I wonder if our information age, where everything is a
Hmm.
Google away, where we have access to any instant knowledge, fact, or whatever, I wonder if that creates a bit of a reluctance to even say what you said, that hey, there's things about God that
Hmm.
unknowable, can't Google it. It's out there, and
Yeah.
we gotta be okay with that. Like that's disturbing. I in my own heart, I'm like, wait, I want to know a fact, and where's my phone? Like I need to know it now. Like there's just that, you know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
that need to
Hmm.
have information at your fingertips. But with God, it's just not, doesn't work that way.
His wisdom is unsearchable.
Mm,
It's unsearchable, and that's a good thing, because it
mm,
would actually scare me if me as a finite human being could fully understand and explain God. That would mean I can get a hold of him.
yeah,
I don't want a God that I could fully get a hold of. He's not big enough if that's the case. So I'm gonna just take. He's giving me his word. He's giving me a lot to work with, a whole lot. But there's a lot of stuff. He's worshipped by angels that look like humans and animals at the same time. That's weird. He exists in three, yet they are one God expressing themselves in three distinct persons.
mm-hmm.
That doesn't, I, you can use all these metaphors of ice and water. Those don't make
Yeah,
that you get what I'm saying? So it's,
yeah,
it's like at the end of the day, there are parts of God that it will take an eternity for us to figure out. And I
yeah,
think that that's a really good thing.
yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, that's Job, right? Did you spend some time in Job in your book?
With the suffering portion, yeah,
Okay.
because I mean, anytime you start to address that God is always good, you
Mm-hmm.
have to answer the question of then why is there so much bad?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I sat there for a second, not too
I
long.
just the last few chapters where it's like Job spends the whole book right demanding I mean, he kind of been put up to it with his friends, but I mean, demanding an answer, like, I'm not, why is all this, that's the question of suffering, but God's response is crazy. Who are you?
Oh.
Where were you when I laid the foundation?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't, and it's, I mean, it's so, like, again, counterintuitive, countercultural, really. Like, I'm God, you're not. I don't have to explain. I can't, you couldn't, I almost quoted Jack Nicholson.
Mm-hmm.
You can't handle the truth, right? Like, you couldn't handle, if I actually gave you the answer you're begging me for, you would not be able to understand that.
That's true. Yeah, it's totally his. There's another theologian that I think is that the Barth guy who spent a lot of time on God being knowable and unknowable and all this thing. And it's just like, yeah, there is, God is, he has the right and the freedom to reveal himself however and whenever he chooses.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one day, hey, yeah, I'm going to be in a pillar of cloud.
Mm-hmm.
Now, oh, it's nighttime, pillar of fire.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Moses, you want to see me? No, you're not going to see me. You're going to see my back. Go and get in that rock, you know. Oh, yeah, and then I'm going to incarnate and become a man. It's just, it's a lot. It's a lot there.
Well, I hope people pick up the book and engage it. Holier Than Thou. Can't wait for my copy in the mail. Whenever it gets here, haven't seen it yet.
It's a coming. It's a coming.
Let's shift gears a little bit. Here's a question I've been wanting to ask you. Gonna get a little personal here. You have a lot of fans, people that really love your stuff, and you know you're active on social media. There's probably a lot of people that would give anything to spend time with you, to hang out with you. How do you, because I know you're more of an introvert like I am.
Mm-hmm.
How do you handle that? Just that, even that knowledge, you post something on Instagram and I don't, tens of thousands of people are like, this is awesome, and like commenting and like, does that stress you out? Are you used to it? Is it, how do you manage that?
I think all of that. One, I'm used to it a little bit because I became a Christian at 19. I put out my first poem at 20, and the poem went mini viral. And so it was kind of like, since the beginning of my Christian walk, I've had different measures of platform, and I'm grateful that God kind of extended it slowly. And so it just wasn't like, I think now cats, TikTok, they just blow up immediately, and I just don't know how my heart would have been able to handle that. So there's a level of, I'm used to it. And then there's a pressure, this fear, because I know myself. It's like, yeah, I do have good things to say, and I am grateful that it inspires people and edifies you. But it's also like, I can't live up to whatever weight you might be putting on me,
Yeah.
And then it's like, I'm encouraged. It's like, man, like I'm only 32, the Lord is using me for however long he wants to use me in this way. That's a privilege. And I don't despise it.
Do you have to just shut down like phone, computer, whatever, like at night or weekends, whatever, or
I don't have notifications on my phone. That would be insane.
Yeah.
My Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok apps are not on my front page of my phone, and so I have to like go through a lot of work to access them, which really does retrain your brain to not click on it as soon as you open up your phone. And then I've just I'm seeing how important it is to withdraw. And I say that because there's this passage, I don't know where it is. This is in one of the Gospels where it says, with Jesus, as the report of him grew, he would withdraw to desolate places and pray. And that's like, wow, that's how Jesus handled fame, if you will, popularity, is that he did not continue to put himself out there, but he would actually go to quiet places to be with God. And so I think that's one thing that I've been trying to put into practice is, how do I practice? Like, I'm not going to go to a desert. I got kids. But how can I withdraw get with the Father, so that when I do enter back into the world, I'm much more useful, because it's not about me at that point. It's about the Lord.
Do you have a good like embodied community, like a local group of people that where you recharge and stuff? I found it.
I wish I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I did. No, I do have people, because I've moved a lot, but I do have people that I can talk to, and that I do talk to, that are wiser and older than me, but they live in different cities. The hard part with where we are now is that when we moved to Atlanta, we just had to try to get acclimated into this new church, and we were so busy that it was just hard to build that community. But it was also weird because it's hard to fight past preconceived notions about who you are, and then the pandemic happened and the church was gone. And so it's just like, it's something that I want and that I pray for, that it's just hard to get.
It's gotta be hard too, given who you are. Can you go to a place where people don't know who you are, and you're just Jackie? You're not Jackie Hill Perry. You're just Jackie.
In secular spaces, yes.
Yeah.
Christian spaces, there is always the possibility.
Yeah.
Of that. But one thing I learned from my pastor in Chicago that I really leaned into, he was like, it's your job to humanize yourself. You cannot depend on other people to not treat you according to what they've seen. And so the tendency or the temptation is to isolate and say, oh, everybody just sees me through this lens. And it's like, yeah, so be hospitable, invite them over your house so they see you in real life, so they can be up close. And it's when it's doing the work of pushing close to people and trying to create a sense of intimacy that tears those kinds of walls down. Now, as an introvert, that's terrifying, but as a Christian, I know that that's the necessary thing I need to do, because it's not healthy for anybody to be alone, especially people with a platform.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Was that Charlie? You said you're a pastor in Chicago?
No, my pastor, Brian Dye. I went to a church called Legacy in Chicago. It was a house church. So community was very easy there.
Oh, house church.
Yeah, it was maybe max 18 of us. And then it was a community of house churches. And once a month we would come together, and it would be maybe about 250 people. But in general, it was just such a close knit situation. It was beautiful.
Is that your preferred ecclesiology? It's a weird way of putting it. Obviously, we're both geeky theologians, but is that, or is it just what you did at the time?
I think it's pros and cons. Yeah, I think it's pros and cons. I think I think it can be very uncomfortable. But the reason it was uncomfortable is the reason I liked it is because you cannot hide. Mm-hmm. You cannot hide in a living room with 15 people. Like they know you, and they see when you walk in the living room and you're down. They see it. And I remember I would come to church and I would, have a mood or something be going on, and they would see it and say, Jackie, what's going on? You want to talk about it? Larger churches, you can sit in the back and leave and nobody knows that you're depressed. And so, but they also typically have more order. it's more structured environment. And so it's pros and cons to both.
Are you at a bigger church now?
I am. I'm at Cornerstone in Atlanta with led by John O. So it's not bigger to people in like Texas, but it's big to me because it's like 300, 400 people every Sunday. And it's like, this is a mega church.
Oh, okay. What y'all say? That seems pretty small to me. Wow.
Yeah, that's big to me. That's too many people. That's a lot of people to try to get to know.
That's such an introvert thing to say.
It is. It's overwhelming. It's just like, oh my gosh. It's like all of you here all at the same time.
I find, I've had a hard time. We've done big churches, medium churches, small churches. We're at a decent sized church. Well, yeah, a couple thousand, so a lot bigger than yours, but I found, bigger churches, they have to have like small groups, and that's how you get involved and stuff. I know I'm not supposed to say this, but I just never really, resonated with small groups. Not small groups of people, but small groups, like as a church kind of thing. I just have, in my own experience, just never, I felt like I was always kind of pouring out more and wasn't, I don't know.
I haven't experienced them enough. here. And I'm sure it's different at different churches. I think also the life stage I'm in is
Yeah.
so unique, where it's like, bro, like I have three little kids,
Yeah.
and some of these small groups are just kind of with just a bunch of single women, who have the freedom to just kind of come and go. And it's just like, even when I come, I'm super distracted because I have to wrangle my children, and it's not a mixed gender one. So it's like I don't have help. So it's just like it makes it so much harder to
Yeah.
actually engage when the environment itself isn't acclimated to the life stage that you're in currently at the moment. So, and I'm not complaining. I'm just saying it's not
Yeah.
as clean cut.
Well, that's where people would say, well, man, you shouldn't be on your own with your kids. Like, people should jump in and help out, but that can't come from you. Like, that needs to be somebody else being
Yeah.
aware of, like,
Hey, girl, I met the other Sunday. You mind holding my baby? Yeah,
yeah,
I don't know.
that's tough. That's tough. Seminary. You're still in seminary?
Yeah,
How's that
I
going?
am. I took a break for the summer.
Okay. Yeah.
It is it's good. I just really enjoy learning.
Huh.
I really enjoy it. It's what I don't like, however, is exams and papers and stuff. I wish I could just learn without having to like test it. But in general, like I've pretty much decided I want to go as far as PhD if the Lord allows
Really?
it. Yeah, just because what it does for my heart, and it's clarified some of my ideas. It's
Yeah.
made me more precise in my thinking and even communication of stuff. It's broadened my horizons to even the particulars of certain arguments and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
I just enjoy it. And so it's difficult, but
You're at, is it RTS?
yeah, Reformed Theological Seminary in Atlanta.
Oh, so it's you actually, it's not online. Like, you go to class.
Yeah, if it was online, I wouldn't do it because I would be distracted by like emails and life and text messages. Like being local,
Yeah.
it's just it's kind of like keeps me accountable to have to go to a
Yeah.
classroom and sit, and it's just better. You get to like learn from your classmates.
I guess another personal question: is it hard being Jackie Hill Perry with other people who everybody knows who you are? Like, do you feel like you're treated differently, or do you not pay attention to that stuff?
No, and I'm in most of my classes are all white men.
Okay.
So their wives are the ones that would be more awkward. They don't even, they just say hi to me and they kind of keep it moving. They don't really talk to me like that. So.
Wait, so is your fan base largely female?
Oh yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. Well, analytically on Instagram it's 85% female.
Really?
Yeah.
I wonder what because I don't know how to do. I hardly even know what analytics means. Like, I'd be curious. I'd be really curious about both the theological background, the sex of the age, ethnicity. I'd be really curious. Is that, you can find that out, or is that's just from social, like your social media followers?
Yeah, ask one of your kids. It's like in the settings, and you can. It's called Insights, and you can see the age group, the highest, the regions, the most popular regions that follow you, countries, the time of day your people are most likely to interact with your content. It's actually really helpful.
Wait, is this just Instagram?
This is just Instagram.
Okay.
So I can't speak for podcast or Twitter or Facebook. But.
So I can tell you right now that my Instagram fan base is going to be very similar to yours. Because every now and then I'll look at my followers and I'm like, how did I get 2,000 followers? Then I'll go over to Jackie Hill's, and sure enough, you mentioned my name. So I think at least 90% of my Instagram followers have come from you. So
I promote Preston Sprinkles so much. You would think you were paying me. I'm not even playing.
Whenever my publisher says, "Hey, we saw a spike in sales," I'm like, "Yeah, Jackie probably mentioned the book or something." That's funny.
I am team Preston. I did an interview with a station in London, and they asked me about the transgender question.
Oh.
And I pulled up Sam Alberry's book and your book. I said, these are people who have done the work. Jackie has not done the work. Follow them, go on their Amazon, buy their books, give them money so they can make their advance back. Okay?
Oh yeah, I saw you were over in London. Was that did you just get back?
Yeah, I got back Sunday night. So
is it open, or what was it like being in the UK?
It's open, as in like you don't have to wear a mask. Okay. But like people who are out of the international arrivals are supposed to quarantine for 10 days upon arrival. I did not do that. I was there for 4 days.
Even if you've been vaccinated?
Yeah, because they don't, I guess, accept like U.S. vaccines, even though Pfizer and Moderna isn't like.
Really?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. So don't do what I did because you might get fined. I just was kind of like, Lord, I got to go home. So I was all right. They didn't find me. But
because I've traveled quite a bit this last year compared to most people, I think. And even as a family, we've traveled a few times. I have spent so much money on COVID tests. It's unreal. I don't even want to add it up because it's like we were in I was on sabbatical, and part of my sabbatical was in Alaska. So we're walking through the airport. They will not let you out at the time. This is last year. They were like, all right, you need a COVID test. Here's the testing center. $250 a pop. I got 4 kids. I dropped $1,500 on COVID tests. And then come to find out later, it was like, or you can quarantine. I'm like, man, I don't want to quarantine for 14 days. But once we got to our place, literally they were like, no, they just say that at the airport probably to get people to pay for COVID tests, but no one's like checking.
Yeah.
I was a good citizen. I've been very COVID conscious, doing everything I'm supposed to do. But man, it's been expensive being a good citizen.
That's an investment. Yeah, I usually just go to Walgreens or CVS because their tests are free, but they're not. They're not usually like, you can't get like a rapid test. You have to wait like 24 hours for a result. But
well, see, that makes me. So how come they set up shop in the airport so you have no choice? I didn't need it. Like I got my results came like 4 days later. It wasn't like they gave me my results then.
Oh.
No, that's crim. That makes me mad. I'm gonna email somebody up.
I'm sorry. I'm thinking you getting it within an hour. That's why you paying such a high price.
We were in Kenya and Tanzania last month, and going from the Kenya border to crossing over to Tanzania, you had to have a COVID test to get to for the border. When we got there, I showed them the form. Hey, I paid I think it was like $80. And they're like, oh yeah, but you need to do another one here. I'm like, what do you need? I got it right. I'm like, well, we can't get through until you do another one here. It was $25. I'm like, it's another 25. Gosh. So, but they got the results back in like 6 minutes.
Oh yeah.
It was so quick. I'm like, wait a minute. You're telling me that the you guys in Tanzania are way more like, apparently in America it takes me like 3 days to get it back, and it costs $250 to get a test in the airport. I'm like, well, you guys got like something going on here. But anyway,
I'm sorry. You need a savings account just for COVID tests. You call your accountant, see if it's a write-off.
Oh my goodness.
It might be.
Yeah, actually. Yeah. Anyway, are you allowed to say publicly if you're thinking about another book yet? Because you spaced out your first two pretty broadly.
Yeah, not even on purpose. Because I had the Jude Bible study in between both.
Oh, right.
And a baby, and so that's part of it. Yeah, I have an idea for a book in my mind, and I'll just say the idea because it might not come to fruition for a couple of years. I really want to do a book about faith. Like it's just another concept that I think is really important to the Christian that I don't know if we fully understand or grapple with. There's so many questions around it. Like faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. What does that mean?
Yeah,
really?
What does that mean?
like let's explore that. God says, you cannot please God if you don't have faith. That's heavy. So that means I need to know when I actually am functioning in faith and when it's just unbelief or deception or delusion or whatever. And so, yeah, I just really want to explore that, especially in a culture of deconstructing our faith. What are healthy ways or bad ways to do that? What does it mean to do that? What is doubt? What is doubt's place in the Christian's life?
Hmm.
I just have a lot of questions.
The doubt one is tricky because I resonate with people that are honest, right, with their questions, that even with
Right.
doubt or whatever. You read the Psalms, and it's like there's doubt everywhere. Lamentations is a book on doubt, but then you have James getting on us for doubting, or wavering, or
Right.
double-minded, like that. Have you
That's
thought through
true.
that tension? Like where is it okay to doubt? What does that even mean?
Yeah.
Or-
Because I wonder, I've always wondered really if there is a distinction between doubt and unbelief, where Abraham, or who was it? Was it Abraham? When they came to him and said, "Hey, next year this time
Yeah.
you're going to have a son,"
Yeah.
and he asked the question, how will this be?" But he wasn't reprimanded for his question,
Yeah.
And so I wonder, is that a healthy doubt to say, "I just don't know how this will happen. Can you explain more?" Versus Sarah, who they come and do the same thing, and she's like, "Yeah, right." And she's like it's two different experiences but these are really extreme measures that they're being called to trust in. And so why wouldn't they have questions?
Yeah.
We're old. My
Yeah.
ovaries are gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, they're not gone, but they're prunish at that point.
I love
So
what
I mean,
I love what they tell her too. Like, well, why did you laugh? Like, I didn't laugh. Oh, but you did laugh. Like,
but you did. The text literally says, "But you did."
yeah, I heard you laugh. Don't
Like,
you lie to me now. Don't you?
you definitely did. Like we could judge you for that, but we're being merciful because we need Isaac to come up in here.
Yeah.
Or so I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think it would be life-giving for Christians to identify the place that doubt could or should have in our journey with God,
Yeah.
so that we don't, become overly anxious or even depressed at our experiences of being human.
And I think it's hard for me because genuine belief can't be forced. So like if my kids come to me and say, "Hey, I'm kind of doubting Christianity," I can't say, "Well, stop it, don't," or if they're like, "Hey, I got questions, like how do we know the Bible's true?" I'm not sure, or it doesn't feel like this passage is like legit. Like one of my daughters came to me the other day asking about the conquest. She's like, I don't really killing soldiers, I get, but women and children and babies, like I don't, that doesn't sit right with me. Like, do I say, stop it and just believe it? Like, well, that's not, even if she obeyed me in that moment, that's not genuine belief. So I'm like, no, it's a great question. Go ahead and doubt whether you think, but maybe that's not the kind of doubt that the Bible's talking about in James. Is it James 1?
Yeah, double-minded man is unstable in his way, all his ways.
Yeah.
And even praying, praying with faith. What does that mean? I think I know what it means because I've done it.
Yeah.
But there are also times where I am still very reluctant that my prayer will be answered, but I'm doing it anyway because it's the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. Is that a waste of time? Mm-hmm. Is that vain? Should I just not pray? I don't know.
And sometimes when I give the qualification, like if it's your will, like Lord, heal. So this is actually a real story. I'm deaf. I was born deaf in my left ear, and I was raised very anti-charismatic, John MacArthur circles. So never even considered but I've grown out of that environment, and I'm trying to be more charismatic. So but yeah, I've gone for healing a few times. The last one is a few years ago. A preacher said, "If anybody needs healing, come and I'll pray for you." And so I went forward, and I think I was genuinely like, God, I believe you can do this.
Yeah.
And I'm going forward because I'm open to the possibility of you actually healing my deaf ear. And yet my faith isn't I'm not going to doubt your existence if you don't heal. You don't need to heal me either. I'm okay with that. Right. But some people would say, well, no, you shouldn't even leave. You should pray, go forward, believing 100% he will heal you. And I just have a problem with that kind of confidence when it comes to God, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Am I off? What do you think?
I think that I agree. I think there's a level of certainty that we should have, but not necessarily on what God will do, but what he can do.
Right.
Like I can't force God's hand. And so, God, I know you can heal me. You're God. But if you don't, what I'm also believing you for is that you could also give me a heart of contentment, like
Yeah.
a heart of gratefulness
Right.
in the
Right.
meantime. And so there's still some faith there. That's not unbelief, but it also, it opens my arms up to say whatever God allows, he allows. And
Yeah.
that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
I think that's the right posture. But some people would say, no, once you leave the door open to, he might not, then you're not truly believing, I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's then trusting our faith,
Yeah.
like trusting in our prayer of faith to force God
Yeah.
into action. Is that faith really, or is
Yeah.
that control? I don't know.
So for the record, y'all, Jackie Hill agrees with me, so y'all can take a hike. Before I
Yeah.
let you go, I got a few more minutes. I have to ask a question. Are you done or tired of talking about sexuality? I mean, that's obviously
I'm
your
not.
first book, or do you still? Is that a main? Is that something when people ask you to speak, which I do all the time? Is that still the main thing people want you to talk on, or?
It's not the main thing. It's still a thing though.
Okay.
Yeah, I still enjoy it. I think I have some insecurities though, just because there's so many other things on my plate that
Yeah.
I don't feel like I often have the time to re-educate myself or
Yeah.
even be aware of just some of the new arguments or new ideas or new approaches to it. And so
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I feel like, man, there are people who I think are more equipped right now
Mm-hmm.
for this conversation than me, somebody who's been only spending 2 years to talk about or study God's holiness.
Yeah.
you know but it's just a continually fascinating conversation to me. It really is, just the sexuality and the human body and the mind and our affections and how that
Mm.
relates to the different things our culture believes about
Mm.
ourselves and each other and love and rights. And
Mm.
even just recently having a lot of friends kind of distance themselves from me in light of them choosing a different path, and just
Mm.
wrestling with that, like, oh wow, like I'm going through what I've counseled people with. Like that's an interesting place.
What
So
what's can you drill down a little deeper? What's fascinating to you about those questions? Like the fact that people are asking them, or that they're more complex than.
that is very complicated.
Mm-hmm.
It's not extremely black and white. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what's fascinating, and just how, I guess, human it is to feel
Hmm.
and to love and want relationship, but also to say, man, but I have this Christian framework that speaks to the deceptiveness
Hmm.
of our feelings and how motivated they really are by a nature that is darkened, but also the refusal of the culture to even consider that that's a possibility.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
That like how I feel, though valid or a true experience, that somehow shouldn't be explored
Hmm.
and loved. But it's like, man, there's so many other experiences that we recognize, though it's a real one. It shouldn't. So for example, we don't debate or argue with the husband who honors his wife by denying and resisting and putting to death whatever desire he might have for a woman who is not his wife. We don't argue with that. We
Hmm.
see beauty and righteousness and love in that. But when we apply that to our individual selves and how we should relate to God and saying, no, he is our husband, he is the
Hmm.
primary love for which we should submit ourselves, then it's homophobic.
Hmm.
Then it's problematic. And so I guess I wonder why
Hmm.
it's so hard to see the connection between self-denial
Hmm.
and love
Hmm.
for God.
Wow, that's good.
I don't know if that makes sense,
No, no, it totally
but
does. No, it doesn't me. I've seen such a obviously everything's so much more polarized over the last couple of years. Politics, church, COVID. I mean, so many things, and I feel like the sexuality conversations. I'm getting more and more emails, for instance, from like parents with
mm,
gay or lesbian or trans kids, where the kid is like, if you don't like affirm, like agree with me and affirm everything, then you are toxic and you're of no business in
yeah,
my life. Like that not we can agree to disagree, or I know you still love me even though we really disagree on
yeah,
this, or and really good, like good from what I can tell, like good loving relationships. But I've seen such an increase of just that binary. Like if you don't toe the line on everything within my kind of tribalistic idea, and it's all wrapped up in the all kinds of other things.
It is.
It's sad. Like parents say, "What do I do?" I'm like, I don't.
Yeah. What do you do? Even as a parent now, I'm like, I feel this burden to build such a relationship of love, openness, and trust, and room, space to feel how you feel and express that, and me not force you to feel a different way. Because I wonder how much of that has been consistent in the life of parent and child relationships, so that when they do reach a certain age, there's a trust that your parent is wise, you know, and so that you could say, hey, this is how I'm feeling. I want your ideas, even if I disagree with them, you know. But we're also expecting teenagers to act like adults, and that's just not.
Yeah.
Teenagers are really crazy. So,
I mean, and they're going through so many difficulties today. I mean, just especially through COVID and everything, the mental health issues and social media is. This is I rarely give dogmatic life advice. Okay, love God, love others, read your Bible. You know, when it comes to parenting, I'm really cautious. Here's one I will give to every single parent out there: don't let your kids get on social media until they're 18. No, if they've already done it, you can't take that away. That's what's done is done. You got to mitigate that. But I would not give my kid a loaded gun. I would not give them a pile of crack cocaine. And I wouldn't give them at 13 or 14 access to something that has been proven over and over and over again to be literally chemically addictive and destructive psychologically, mentally, spiritually. Why would I entrust that to a 14, 15, 13, 12-year-old kid? If your kids are 9, 10, 11, you can just have that rule and it'll go fine. It'll be a hard conversation for a little bit. It's hard for our kids a little bit, but life went on.
I'm taking your advice.
No, I'm on social media. You're on but I'm an adult. I know how to turn it off. I'm mature enough to hold this loaded gun. That's a bad analogy, but I'm mature enough to have the crack pipe and not smoke it too much.
Right. Sure.
And I have a lifetime of relating to people socially who are embodied in front of me. I know how to have a conversation face to face. Like their world, they if they're on social media, that will be the primary way in which they form relationships. We don't know the sociological long-term effects of that. So I'm not going to experiment on my kids to. Anyway, very passionate about this.
That's
but
very
I
wise.
think that would prevent some of the difficulties down the road, because where else are they getting a lot of this thinking? But
it's really a Psalms 1:1 ethic to me. You know, blessed is the man who doesn't sit in stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the seat of scoffers. I think social media is a kind of communal, mind renewing or altering space. In a real way. And so I totally agree. And I'm applying that. I don't care how mad they get. They'll be all right.
One more question. I've always wanted to know this. Since you wrote Gay Girl, Good God, have you shifted your view on anything within the sexuality conversation? Obviously your theological views haven't changed or whatever, but is there kind of more finer nuances or even emphases or posture or whatever that you would say you kind of would disagree with yourself from 5 years ago or whatever?
That's a great question. I think I am much more gracious and understanding towards those who would identify as gay Christian.
Okay.
And by gay Christian, I don't know how the side A, side B distinction, but like those who live a biblical conservative sexual ethic, but would say that they, they're being true to themselves by calling themselves gay. I think when I was writing Gay Girl, Good God, and even before that, I was super kind of hard on it in my heart, where I was just like, it's confusing. It's this, it's that. And I still hold some of those convictions, but I'm just so way more open to just like, okay. Do what you feel is best for you. Like I just think it's not unnecessary. I just don't think it's a hill to die on.
Okay.
That's I think that's one thing that significantly changed for
Huh.
me, and that's just
Yeah.
by having conversations with those
Yeah.
who would identify as gay Christians and hearing their perspectives. They've thought through this.
Yeah.
They just haven't arbitrarily labeled themselves that just because.
Yeah. And even that the group you're thinking of, yeah, I've got a lot of friends in that group. Even they would say, I rarely, if ever, would actually use that phrase. I am a gay,
Right.
with just the term gay to describe the fact that they experience ongoing same-sex temptations, or however you want to word it. That would be a
Yeah.
more conservative way of wording it. Like the term that I've felt that best names that experience, especially for younger people, is the term gay. And I'm not investing. Obviously, if I'm committed to celibacy out of allegiance to Jesus, my gayness is not on the throne of my life. Like, come on, like that's insulting to.
Yeah.
No, Jesus is on the throne of your life. Yeah, have you seen what it?
You know what? I know we have to go, but
Yeah.
a really fascinating thought that I've heard. So Rebecca McLaughlin,
Yeah.
she's written a ton of books. We were on a panel together, and we were talking about that, and she said what's interesting to her is that it seems as if those who tend to identify themselves as gay Christians are those who grew up in Christian contexts where they were never out to a certain degree. And she was like, versus people like you who were out and loud with your gayness. And so when you became a Christian, it was a hard cut off from that identity.
Right.
I said, wow,
Yeah.
that's actually, that's really profound to think about. And so I think there's something with that.
That is almost across the. I mean, you think of like you, Chris Yuan, Butterfield.
Rosario.
I mean, they're all for them. The term gay is wrapped up in all kinds of stuff that they're no business, carrying over into their post-Christian life. But for other people, don't have the baggage. Yeah, and I don't know what to make of that, but it is. I've thought about that. That's. It's not across the board, but it's pretty widespread. But. Jackie, thanks so much for being on Theology and Raw. Again, the book is Holier Than Thou. Pick it up or pre-order it wherever books are sold. And really enjoyed the conversation, Jackie. Always.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. or Dr. Sprinkle.